Well, it's the final day of division predictions, and we end off with the AFC West, otherwise known as Chiefs, and the other teams that try. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to another episode of Packcast, a podcast where you don't have to Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Yeah, we all know the Chiefs are winning that division. There's no question. Grossi, and yes, we are finally through all of the divisions just in time for the start of the new NFL season. And there's a bunch to talk about with the AFC West because obviously the Chiefs are going to be the front runner, not just to win the division, but the Super Bowl again. However, there have been some drastic changes within this division, like the Chargers. For the first time in years, I have not overhyped the Chargers because I just don't believe in them anymore. And here's the thing, I want to. I think without Joe Lombardi, they're going to be better. I love Justin Herbert. I love all the skill players on that team. It's just they have disappointed me year in and year out, so I don't talk about them anymore. You have the Broncos, who made sweeping changes at head coach. Russell Wilson is still there. Can he get back to his Seattle form? And then the Raiders are doing things. So lots of things going on in the AFC West. Let's talk about who I think is going to emerge victorious. As always, what we're going to do is talk about each team, kind of what they did in the offseason, look at some of their toughest opponents, predict their floor and their ceiling, and at the end, we'll rank them. And so let's get started with Brandon Perna's team, the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos took a big swing this offseason after taking a bigger swing the previous offseason by trading for Russell Wilson, and they had buyer's remorse almost immediately after doing that. They struggled last year. The offense was putrid, and it just wasn't a good time. And so Nathaniel Hackett got the axe before the season even ended after that terrible Christmas game against the Rams, and they went out and they got Sean Payton, paying a pretty penny to do so. And Sean Payton is reporting directly to the owner, not the GM. So Sean Payton has a ton of power here. And I imagine that Russell Wilson talking to Sean Payton kind of went like this.
I can trust you, right?
No. But the truth is that the Broncos could have a very good defense. They have Patrick Surtain, who is absolutely incredible. They have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. And if that pass rush can kind of get after the quarterback, their defense could be a top 5 unit. Now, looking at their offense, that's where there's some concerns. Their offensive line was not great last year. Russell Wilson was not great last year. Javonte Williams got hurt. And starting off this season hasn't been great in terms of injuries. Javonte Williams is battling back from an injury, which you love to see. But Jerry Jeudy got banged up a little bit. Tim Patrick already out for the year. And so you do wonder about the amount of weapons and protection that Russell Wilson actually has, without even worrying about Russell Wilson himself. Now, of course, the Broncos are going to be going up against 2 tough opponents 2 times each in the Chiefs and the Chargers, and the Raiders, for some reason, keep on kicking their ass as well. Besides those opponents, they are going up against teams like the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Jets. So it's not going to be an easy schedule for them. Plus, the Broncos, their layout of their schedule is not easy whatsoever. And so it is going to be an uphill battle for them to return to the playoffs, but even just return to a winning record. So right now, I have their floor at 6-11. I think that's worst case scenario just because they're going up against some tough teams and you don't know about their offense. But I have their ceiling all the way up at 10-7. I think the Broncos could be a little bit of a surprising team, but everything would need to go right. However, I think for Broncos fans, you just want to see some progress. Is Russell Wilson your guy? Because if he's not, you're just going to go and draft a QB. However, if you just beat the Chiefs this year and end that drought, I mean, that's close enough to a Super Bowl, right? Then speaking of Super Bowls, you got the reigning defending Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, they traded away their best wide receiver in Tyreek Hill last year, and they still won the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter. Now, I will say this offseason, one thing that is concerning is Chris Jones, in which Chris Jones and the Chiefs seem to not really be talking too much. I imagine the Chiefs are trying to explore every possibility of getting Chris Jones back, including this.
What are you gonna do? Annoy him into talking?
Ha ha.
And Chris Jones is a staple of that defense, and he said that he would sit all the way until week 8. But let's be very honest here. It doesn't really matter because if Chris Jones even wins them 1 or 2 more games, they're still going to probably win the division and they're still going to go to the playoffs with or without him. So the Chiefs, they're disgustingly good. They have one of the best coaches of all time, one of the best QBs of all time, and arguably the best tight end of all time. So that's what we're rocking with. Now, their schedule, however, is not a fun time. Besides the games within their division, they're playing against some really tough opponents. They're going up against the Jaguars, the Jets, the Packers. Sorry, I just had to throw them in there. I don't necessarily believe that it's going to be a struggle for them. But on top of that, they're going to be playing against the Eagles, the Bills, the Bengals, the Dolphins. Those are some tough teams that they are going to play. They get to see Tyreek Hill again, which is going to be really fun. And so because of that, even though I don't really believe this, I have their floor all the way down at 9-8. I do not think that is going to be the case. I think everything has to go wrong. And the only reason I have it that low is because of the quality of the opponents that they're going to be facing. And they might lose them in the regular season. It doesn't matter. They'll beat them in the postseason. And I have their ceiling all the way up at 13-4 because they could be one of, if not the best team in all of football, or at least the AFC. So their floor is pretty low, still a winning record, but their ceiling is, of course, incredibly high. Then you got the Vegas Raiders, who also made some big moves this offseason. No more Derek Carr. They brought in Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Myers. Josh Jacobs wound up coming back, which is really good and important because that offense needs to function somehow. And they still have Devontae Adams, which is a good thing. But the Raiders are just in this very, very weird transition period. And it's a little tough to get excited about the Raiders. And I imagine the Raiders are doing everything to try and hype up their fans.
Come on, people, hit the dance floor, have a good time. Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it.
But the truth is that Jimmy Garoppolo is a stopgap quarterback. You don't know about Josh McDaniels, even though you kind of know. It's not going to end well. And they really only have a handful of players that are franchise guys. And so the Raiders, I think, are not going to have the greatest time because not only do they have to play the Chiefs and the Chargers twice, but they also go up against teams like the Bills, the Dolphins, the Jets, and even the Steelers, who could give them a problem. And so I have their floor at 5-12, which is the lowest in this division, and I have their ceiling around 7-10. Jimmy Garoppolo really just doesn't impress me. I think they'll be able to win some games because they have Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, so they do have receiving and rushing options, and 2 of the very best to do so. I just don't know if that's going to be enough to win them a ton of games, but overall, the Raiders, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a fun season for you guys. And then finally, the wild card of this entire division, you got the LA Chargers. And the Chargers, I mean, the biggest move that they did, they went and got a brand new wide receiver in the draft, which I absolutely love because big-bodied guy, put him in there with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. But they, of course, they re-signed Justin Herbert, who I imagine is acting like this after signing his new contract. And rightfully so. Another big move, as I mentioned before, they got rid of Joe Lombardi, which I love. I was so tired of watching checkdowns. When Justin Herbert, he can throw it deep. And I will never forget Herbert against the Raiders in that last game of the season in which Herbert was just converting 4th down after 4th down, saying, hey, this guy, he can frickin' frack and play. But it just seems like every time I get excited about the Chargers, they are so disappointing, they collapse, and when they should win games, they blow them in historic fashion. Looking at you, Jaguars game from the wild card round. And as they are playing the Chiefs twice, they again don't have the easiest schedule. They're playing the Dolphins, the Cowboys, the Lions, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Jets. So that's not a fun gauntlet to go through. I do think they have the offensive firepower to go up with just about any team in the AFC, and I think they can make the playoffs. However, because of the quality of their opponents, I do have their floor all the way down at 7-10, which again, I don't think they're going to hit, and I have their ceiling at 10-7 because I want to see what that offense looks like with Kellen Moore. I want to see if they are stretching the field, if Austin Eckler is going to be more involved in that offense. There's a lot of question marks there, and then of course you look at the defense. So overall, I think the Chargers will be a good competitive team. I think they have a decent shot at making the postseason. It's just going to be, can they put it all together? And so if we're going with each team's ceiling, you would have the Chiefs winning the division, you would have the Chargers and Broncos fighting it out for 2nd and 3rd place, and you would have the Raiders coming in 4th. But as always, let me know what you think down in the comments below. You can always send me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy, all social media, see down below. Check out Patcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi, And as always, go Pack Go.